Welcome to another episode of the Right People, Right Places podcast. I'm your host, Raul Mendoza, and we are here at the Chicago Build Expo 2025, and I have the absolute pleasure of having Matthew on here, Matthew Richardson, who is a Chief Human Resource Officer for a fantastic organization, which I'll have him share more about in a bit, but we're going to be talking about built on values, leading with integrity, humility, and fearlessness. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background on Matthew, he's joining us today as someone who truly embodies these principles. As I mentioned already, he's the Chief People Officer and Principal at Lamar Johnson Collaborative, one of the leading architecture, design, and planning firms shaping communities across the country. So he's a culture builder, he's a communicator, an advocate for people. I actually just stepped away from one of his talks on attracting talent to the AEC space. He moderated the panel and did a fantastic job. So we're very excited to have him on to talk about culture, primarily these particular values that there'll be a few values that we'll be diving into a little bit more, as mentioned here. Again, integrity, humility, and fearlessness. So he comes with 16 years or more than 16 years of experience, but 16 years with Gensler, where he built his reputation as a creative leader in communication strategy and brand storytelling. So be prepared to hear some great stories about people, culture, and so happy to have you on, Matthew.
I'm delighted to be here, Raul, and I will do my best after that introduction not to try and do your job and just listen and answer the questions,
Excellent.
Not ask any. Although for a future episode, if you would like me to interview Raul, I think that might be interesting for your audience. So
I mean, we could do that. We've got time.
Happy to do that someday. Yeah.
But let's kick into it here. You know, I know we were syncing up prior to the event on particular things that we wanted to hone in for this conversation in our audience, but let's dive in. And, you spent your career helping organizations connect people, culture, and purpose. When you think about the title of today's episode, which I've mentioned already, Built on Values, what do integrity, humility, and fearlessness mean to you as a leader?
Well, I think they probably sound a little different in my ear than most people, because those are the values of Lamar Johnson Collaborative, LJC, the organization that I'm part of now. But I think it's important for people to understand that when you're forming a company, which I had the unique pleasure of getting to do, you noted the 16 years at Gensler, but from there, it was an invitation from Lamar to start a company with him.
Wow. Okay.
And when he first called me on the phone, I was away on summer vacation. And I distinctly remember telling him, "You're insane. Why would you ever want me to join you? I have none of the skills you need." He disagreed strongly. And on some reflection, I realized here was an opportunity to do something that no one else was going to ask me to do. Figure out how to do payroll, buy health insurance, be desktop IT support, which is ridiculous if you've ever seen me using
Very
mouse.
multiple hats.
Yeah, that was the start. But as important as figuring out how to build sort of the skeleton of the company was to determine what its values were.
Yeah.
These values are probably most authentic to Lamar, but also to the people that he initially hired on.
Yep.
I will share as a side, which I think is important. If you look at the cardinal virtues, and I don't know if you know what those are, of courage, discipline, justice, and wisdom, there are some similarities.
Yeah.
I don't think it was intentional that we ended up on our integrity, humility, and fearlessness, but I see a strong connection between those. And those, of course, go back to early Christian faith, to Greek and Roman. They're called cardinal because that's cardos. It means the hinge, right? Everything is pivots on these. When you are starting an organization, you got to know what you believe in.
Yep.
You got to know what you believe in as a collective, as a group, not just individually. Lamar wasn't looking to build an organization of superstars, although that is kind of how we started. We had to have some commonality. And as we were originally branding the organization, the wonderful woman we worked with, Lauren Howitter, had us focus on what are your values? What do you actually believe in? And so ours were integrity, humility, and fearlessness. And as I said, values are foundational. Once you establish those, you can say who you are. Yeah, we're a design firm. Saying you're a design firm is almost a throwaway.
Right.
You need to be a human being, not a human doing, and a human being has beliefs and values. You know what
Yes.
you care about, and those will actually be your guide when you run into crisis in the future and
Yep.
you're trying to make a decision. So
Love it. Love it. So you were, gosh, so you were on the ground floor with Lamar.
it was an interesting time, to be sure. You could plan the day as much as we've planned this conversation as
Right.
you wanted, but the reality was you never knew what was coming. We thought we were really technology advanced, and we had all of our servers were based in the cloud early. Those servers went down on a regular basis. So you can imagine just how we had to pivot from day to day
Right.
to figure out who we were gonna become. So
That's excellent. That's excellent. And I just love that you were there since the beginning. I think it's not too often that an HR leader gets to be a part of creating the foundation of values for a company and then continue on with that organization and kind of see it grow and develop over the years. So I'm assuming there's been great growth for Lamar. I think there's been a great partnership that's happened with Clayco as well in recent years.
Yeah, and I should start by saying that early on, I wouldn't have called myself an HR leader. That came later.
Okay.
Early on, I was just part of the group, right?
Interesting. Okay.
Everybody does everything. That was the mentality. You kind of had to get on board with that. I know you're going to ask me, or I expect you may ask me to talk about those values a little bit later.
Yes.
Part of fearlessness is just being willing to roll up your sleeves and get in there. But we'll come back to that. The interest in talent and supporting it came later, actually, when we merged in with Clayco, a bigger organization that had a lot of the good foundational elements we didn't have.
Interesting.
Or we were partnering with externally when we were just little LJC.
Gotcha.
So they had IT, they had risk management and legal, they had marketing and communications. They had recruiting, but they didn't have anyone focusing on talent. That was an opportunity I saw. And so that connected well with my interest in the values. Who were the people that we were bringing into the organization when we first merged? That was critical. And I felt like, since I had been one of the founding members, to have an opportunity to take what we shaped as a group initially and carry that forward with the next generation.
Yep. Love it. Love it. Well, let's get into these values.
Okay.
So, you're sitting, again, being in your leadership role and even the history that you've had from start to finish with Lamar, you're in that cross section between leadership and culture. How does integrity show up in leadership decisions? Especially the tough ones. And I guess let me back up a little bit there.
Sure.
How do you define integrity, and, how does the organization define it? And how do you, a lot of questions there, but,
Yeah, I think what I would say, Raul, is integrity is saying what you're going to do, then doing what you said you were going to do, and fulfilling a promise that you made to whoever you're working with. I think what I've observed, I'm old enough now to see people transition from that early stage of superstar talent. And then your organization is going to ask you to become a leader. You haven't been trained in that. You don't know what that means. And you want to tell everybody everything you know, or there's a tendency early on to just
absolutely
vomit all the information and learnings that you've had on people and expect them to just pick it up.
Right.
That's not really leading. That's more preaching. Maybe graciously it would be managing, but it's not the same as leading.
Yeah.
And so integrity is determining on behalf of all. So you're also that shift as you go from superstar talent to leader is also a shift in perspective.
Yep.
You're now looking out not only for the good of yourself and your own development, you're looking out for the greater whole. You've heard people talk about servant leaders. That's what it's really about. Your interest now is on building a culture, a team, a way of being and operating and creating together. That's really what it's about. And integrity comes in identifying what the organization needs, hopefully before the rest of the team figures it out.
Right.
And if you are too slow for that, then at least being willing to hear what the team is telling you to do
Right.
or where you need to go, responding to that, and then delivering on it. Not just saying we're going to do it, you're delivering on it.
Right. So mean what you say what you mean. And I think that actually segues nicely into this issue of humility, this value of humility, because I think that's kind of the context of great leadership, right? Like this ability to I think a lot of times when people think of humility, they think of lowering themselves, coming low, but I think true humility is actually the ability to have an honest estimation of yourself. So not to think too highly of yourself, not to think too lowly of yourself, because either is really pride, either is really ego. Yeah. But having that proper estimation of yourself is really, but anyway, we're not here to hear my thoughts. We're here to hear your thoughts on humility.
It's right. Look, hey, ego is healthy.
Yes.
When I see people who are not advocating for themselves enough, like, we actually need to dial up your ego a little bit, right? You gotta, I need you to come into who you were meant to be, right? So
that's really good.
Sometimes that is important. There is a tendency, however, when someone moves into leadership for the first time, that if not checked, if not asking yourself, am I being a good servant to my colleagues? The head blows up, the perspective is lost. There's too much of a focus on what you think you know. And trust me, if you believe you know how to do something, you are absolutely right. You've got to humble yourself as a leader to say, I don't know the answers, but I bet with all the talent around here, I am committed to finding that answer for all of us to make it work for the best of the organization. So to me, as you say, humility is not bending down low. It is acknowledging your debt to the others, because you didn't get there by yourself.
That's true.
You may think you did, but your success is the result of lots of different people, and maybe some fortunate chance, but lots of different people likely were supporting you. It's good to remember them. Your relationship is going to change with them over the time.
Yeah. You
may no longer like who they're becoming and who you're becoming, but you still have a debt to them for where you got to where you are.
Gosh,
acknowledging that debt, it is now incumbent on you to take the position of the person who helped you along to help others. It's kind of a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
But we all have a part to play particularly as we go from transition from one generation of leadership to another.
Very good. I have so many questions I could ask you about that process, because I think there's something about, one leader raises you up and you learn and you develop and you grow and you come into your own. And I feel like what can happen at a certain point is like that leader can bite the hand that fed it, and that happens actually quite a bit. And I'm actually in situations right now, within business context where that's happening with organizations, where all of a sudden these leaders have come of age,
right,
and under the tutelage of great leaders.
Yeah.
And it's almost kind of like they're biting the hand that fed them. So there isn't that honoring of that generation, but it's kind of tricky. It's kind of messy. It's like, how do you do that well? And anyway,
maybe that's clear. I don't mean that you should just worship the generation that brought you up.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways, when you're in the middle, and what I mean by in the middle is you're coming into leadership, you have to manage up and you have to manage down.
Right, right.
You also need to help those who helped you figure out what their next is.
Yes.
Because more likely than not, they're going to be uncomfortable shifting. Whether they supported you in moving into that leadership position or not,
right,
you're taking over what they were means they have to change. That is painful and uncomfortable.
Right.
And if you're an empathetic person, you're going to work through them with that, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they see that you're trying to help them work through that. But it is like all good relationships, there has to be give and take.
Yes.
Or else it's not going to work.
Totally.
It can't be one-sided. No relationship's ever going to be successful
It's a two-way street.
Yep.
It's a two-way street. You know, we talked about humility.
Yeah.
And I think humble people are deeply involved with community work and care about their communities. And I see you're somebody that really cares about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk to us about that. You know, why is that so important to you? What are some of the things that Lamar does? What are some things that you do personally? Would love to kind of hear that and why that's important.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, at a much younger age in life, I think my parents exposed me to the notion of giving back. So there are parallels now into coming into a leadership position and how you have to help the next generation and the generation that preceded you. Giving to community is acknowledging that you're also part of something bigger than just the company.
That's great.
You're bigger than just the industry that you're in, right? Now, I will say, why did I get involved in the particular organizations that I got in? This is taking a page from Lamar, who absolutely would tell you one of the pillars of his leadership is his community engagement. But Lamar himself had mentors and he passed on the lessons. One of those was from a guy named Bob Wislow.
Okay.
If you don't know who he is, real estate leader, not just in the city of Chicago, although he is Chicago born and bred, but across the country.
Excellent.
Guy worth looking up. Lamar learned from Bob that as best you can, when you come into the position to seize the opportunity, you should volunteer to be on 2 boards. One of those boards should be in your industry. You're giving back to the industry, right?
Good.
And maybe it's a volunteer position. It's not a board position. Not everything has to say board of directors on your resume.
Your resume, right?
The other engagement that you should have, the committee, should be something that you really care about, that you're passionate about. So in my case, getting involved with Chicago Public Media, which is the parent company of the newspaper, the Chicago Sun-Times, and the radio station, WBZ. To me, that was honoring an interest that began when I studied journalism as a student, right? I also think we're at a delicate time in the history of information, the dissemination of information, and my belief that access to public media, free information that everyone can have to use and make informed decisions in their life, to me, that's a human right. Chicago Public Media believes in that as well. So this is an alignment of values. We talked about values earlier. These are ones that I share with them. It's an organization whose mission I absolutely believe in. So I would say to you there and anybody in the audience, it's absolutely worth you thinking about, what am I giving to the industry and what am I giving to something that I really care about? And the reason that's important, what you really care about, is, I'll be quite honest, volunteering sometimes sucks. It's not glamorous.
Work, right?
It's not great.
Yeah.
No one's paying it for it. No one's saying good job. Well, maybe they are, or you get a t-shirt out of it, and that's all fine and good. You got to pivot your perspective to look for a deeper form of compensation. What am I giving to this to get back what they alone can do? What can I alone give so that they can give out to others what they alone can give? You are facilitating a transfer of value. Look at it that way.
I love it. Excellent. That's fantastic. I love that answer. And, you know, we talked about the values of humility, integrity, this issue of fearlessness. I wanted to kind of touch on that a bit here before we move too far, but talk to me about that.
You know, I think we talked earlier about values and sort of the cardinal values in that system. And then there's also sort of, if you study these things enough, Aristotle talked about the mean between 2 values. And on one end, you might have one perspective, on another, very different. The ideal is actually in the middle. If I were to be critical of us, which I will go out on this podcast and be, there is a fearlessness that is reckless on one end, and on the other end, that is probably, how do I put this? It's a kind of cautious. I mean, you can espouse a view, but until you behave, this is really courage, I think,
Yeah.
that we're talking about here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Now, the good thing about courage is you only need to be courageous to really have positive impact 20 seconds at a time, right?
Yeah.
I made a decision. We're going to do this.
Boom.
And then we went forward and we did it,
Yep.
right? That doesn't have to be sustained in the way that integrity kind of has to be your bread and butter every day. And you have to approach things, I think, with humility in mind.
Yes.
So coming back to your question about fearlessness, I think it's somewhat situational,
Sure.
right? You're going to say, all right, Matt, give me some examples of when LJC was fearless, right? I think it would depend. If you asked a designer, if you asked one of the leaders, you would get a very different answer to that. It's getting outside your comfort zone of what you know and think might be the right answer to push for a better answer.
Totally. Yep.
And so that might mean spending more time researching a better solution for a client. It might mean taking an approach that, look, something's on the line, whether it's your reputation or your money, you are putting something into play that's at risk.
Yes.
But there's informed risk taking, and there's, back to that mean, the sort of
Yeah.
just absolute recklessness. That's not what we're talking about. The ideal is somewhere in the middle there.
Yes.
It's having informed opinions, not just espousing beliefs.
Yes.
It's great to have beliefs, but let's back it up with some data.
Yeah.
Let's back it up with some research, and then you make a decision.
Absolutely. No, that's great. I love that. Being
Yeah.
of good courage. I just think Eleanor Roosevelt quotes this, do something that scares you every day. Do one thing that scares you every day, and I think
Right.
there's growth mindset within that.
And going back to the point, you only have to do it for 20 or 30
Right,
seconds.
exactly.
And it's not like the other values. You
Right.
only have to do it for a little bit of time. Put yourself out there.
Totally. I love it. I love it. Well, and kind of wrapping up the conversation,
Sure.
let's touch into communication. And then I'd love to kind of put out some final takeaways for our audience here. But you've started your career in communications and editorial leadership at Gensler. How has that shaped your perspective on storytelling, transparency, and organizational culture?
Well, let me start by saying that I was nowhere near qualified to start out leading anybody in communications. If you actually followed my career trajectory, I started out writing newsletters, right? And then magazine articles for clients. It grew over time, and then redeveloping a website. Becoming a communications leader was the end result of all these stepping stones along the way. The reason I was drawn to this and journalism earlier than that is an interest in storytelling. And I don't think I'm exceptional in that. I think it is a human quality
Yep.
to like storytelling. The most successful speakers, the reason that they can move an audience is because they know how to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason in our human DNA, back to that earlier comment about don't be a preachy leader.
Yeah, right.
If you want someone to walk away and have a directive on what they do, you've got to put together a story
Yes.
that puts them in it, or at least they could project themselves into it, that gets them to move in a direction that you want them to. We are moved as humans by stories, right? Either because you've had that experience that the person telling the story has had, or you want to have an experience like the person is telling the story had, right? It is,
That's so good.
and it can go in many directions. It could be a celebration of your failings,
Yep.
which usually is great fodder for comedy. And honestly, that touches probably more on humility. So you might start there if you're thinking about how to be a storyteller. Where have I bombed in life?
Yeah, right.
I'm going to put together a whole package of stories on that.
Absolutely.
That's a rich vein, by the way.
Well,
If you're anything like me, you're failing every day.
Yeah.
So tap into that would be my recommendation.
I love it. I love what you're saying there, because if you're not failing every day, you're not growing. You know what I mean? And I think it's not just about failure, right? It's about what you're learning from your failures. But if you're failing. I just had a conversation earlier today with someone where we were talking about this issue of failure. And if you're not failing, you're probably not taking enough risks. You know what I mean? And if you're not taking enough risks, you're probably not growing.
And that's another thing I would say to the young emerging leader is, there's a tendency to sort of clam up. And what I mean by that is you get put in this position, you are entrusted now with other people's livelihoods. That is a big weight to bear. The worst thing you could do is seize up and no longer be the person that got you to being considered a leader. There's a reason someone identified you as having leadership material. You've got some talent. Yeah, you might have to flex it in a new way, but that's also the source of your superpower as a leader of other people. Communication internally functions like oxygen. If you're not communicating to your people, you are starving them of oxygen.
I love this illustration.
And in my experience, human beings abhor a vacuum, and so we'll fill it. If there's open space, we move to it. We try to take it over. If there's an area where ideas are lacking or someone's not doing a job adequately, we try to put someone in there to fill it, right? We can't stand that. And the same thing exists within an organization when its leaders aren't communicating to them at a regular basis and in a way that they can trust. Now, let me be really clear. That doesn't mean you have to say all the things you know all the time. You do need, however, to empower people to make decisions that support your values. And hopefully you've also explained the mission and vision so that you trust them enough to say, here's where things are going. Let that inform how you make decisions that you are presented each day, whether it's leading a project, leading a team, whatever the case may be. I think more organizations are comfortable communicating to the outside. Because you can dress that message up and make it look as pretty as can be.
That's marketing, right?
That is marketing. Yes. It's important.
Yes, it is.
You better be doing it or your organization is not going to have a place. But you need to invest, and I think organizations sometimes fall down on this one, as much in internal communications as you do the external. So that's just one additional point I want to make about communications. As I think about internal communications, I know you're interested in receiving feedback. A lot of people say they want feedback, but they don't follow through.
Right.
It is not enough to just say, give me feedback.
Right.
You have to build a relationship of trust whereby the person is comfortable knowing that they can say uncomfortable things to you without repercussion. But you have to earn the right for someone to deliver bad news to you, right? And let me tell you this.
That's true.
If you're having a day where like, today has just been a parade of crap that has been delivered to my door. Pat yourself on the back. Because what it actually means is people trust you to know what to do with the information they've given you. They trust you to make a decision that can change things for the better potentially. You have agency. They're looking forward to you. If that doesn't lift up your posture a little bit, I don't know what will, but I think it's important to know that yes, building a culture of feedback is important, but you have to work for it to get there.
You have to earn it.
You have to earn it. It doesn't come automatic.
I love it. Love it. Thank you for coming back around to that. And actually, in you sharing that, it's kind of brought up a couple thoughts for me. This issue of, we're all chief communication officers. It doesn't matter what role we're in. You're in a CHR role. I'm an owner of a company. We all have a responsibility for communication and getting our ideas across. And being able to do it effectively, and storytelling is the way to do that. And when you were talking about storytelling, I was thinking about this idea of inspiration, and even with your analogy of oxygen and feedback, I thought about that. The reason communication is so important is because people want inspiration. Storytelling is so important because they want to be inspired. They want, and this, I know you were joking about it with failures and sharing those failures and that creating some humor, some opportunity for, levity and laughing. But I think there's inspiration there when a leader is able to kind of bare their soul a bit and be able to share, you know what, I don't do this great. This is what I've learned. And it's not like going back to this value of humility. It's not like they're just bashing on themselves. They're reflecting. They're reflecting on what they've done well and what they've not done well. And in sharing that, there's so much that can be learned.
Well, look, if I see you reflecting on a failure and trying to grow,
Yep.
I know that I have a leader who probably cares about me wanting to grow as well. If I can't see you making an effort to get better or change or evolve, what hope do I have that this organization is going to support me
Right.
in becoming who I'm meant to be?
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
As with so many things in leadership, you have to model the organization that you want to have.
Yep.
It starts with you.
Starts with you. Yeah. What a great way, I think, to even come full circle. It starts with us, and even just with your career. It started with you and a small team at Lamar, where you were building the foundations for what you now have today.
Yeah.
And you get to see, I feel like not too many people get to experience the privilege of being able to see those things actually come to fruition and mature and in the way that you have. And it's been a pleasure having you on. And I guess finally, when you think about integrity, humility, and fearlessness, which of these values do you think leaders today need the most, and why? And maybe we can
Raul,
poke a pin on that.
that is you. Oh man,
Just opening up another can of worms here, aren't I?
it's fine. They, look, they each have their value, and it kind of depends on who you are and the context.
Yep.
We talked earlier about, I sometimes see with younger colleagues, they need to learn to self-advocate better. So for them, like I said, courage is really important.
Courage is very important. Yeah.
We're at a time where I think you have to question, does integrity exist? And I know that sounds really dramatic to say, but
we have to. Yeah.
Because people are saying a lot of things right now. Are they serious?
Right.
In some cases, I think many of us hope they're not serious. They're just talking to talk, but we definitely have an infotainment culture,
right?
Where that is prized. And as I said, integrity is your calling card.
Yep.
That's the currency that you trade in every day. But I think to answer your question, if I'm going to answer your question, humility is the most important, because to get to humility, you have to pause long enough to reflect.
Yeah.
Right? Reflection is so important to an organization. If the leaders aren't afforded time for reflection, if they aren't making time for reflection, that organization is not going to grow long term.
Yes.
So you have to first prize that as a value, and then be humble enough to say, what can I learn from this situation? Or what am I grateful for? Right? Earlier we talked about appreciating the leaders who got you where you are.
Totally.
Right? And don't discount luck. Many of us landed where we are just by God knows what grace put us in that position.
Absolutely.
Not everybody
is
it's a thing.
It's a thing.
It's an absolute thing. But you have to remember that not everybody got that. So it's incumbent on you to help those who didn't get the breaks that you got. Right? So I think, in summary, of those three, humility stands out most because it applies broadest.
Yes.
The other two are absolutely important. And as I say, are your calling card. But start with humility, and then you can get to integrity and fearlessness.
I love it. I love it. Well, Matthew, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And this has been just a rich conversation. I think we've touched on so much within leadership, within building organizations, communication. There's so much here for our listeners. For those that are in CHRO roles or executive roles, I think there's so much value that they can glean from this. So thank you again for being on. the podcast. And to our audience, I just want to say, if you'd like more episodes like this, go ahead and find us wherever you get podcasts. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify. We also can be found on YouTube, and you can subscribe to our podcast there visually. But yeah, lots to reflect on here with humility, kind of being that the thing that we've landed on here as kind of the bedrock, really. And so reflect on that. Matthew, again, thanks for being on, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, Raul.
Yeah.